acres. That makes it's going to be very difficult to put a solar farm up and make money on it. But I think there's a key to 10 acres, and I'm glad that has been adjusted to that. The screening is very thorough. It will be expensive, but it's meant for other people. And so all in all, nothing's perfect, but I think it's time that Clinton really stepped forwards here and became I don't know, pursuer of solar power. And a 10-acre farm, it would be, somebody brought it up several meetings ago, it would be nice if several members of town got together and helped set up a 10-acre farm. Because if we could become self-sufficient and get off of oil, it would be great. Now, I know that at one meeting it was said that the high tension lines, of course, feed New York. But they're ugly, and we're going to need more high tension lines around here if we don't have other means of generating electricity. Everybody's using more electricity. It's going to be the power of the future. And if Central Hudson has to double their capacity, those lines are going to be bigger and ugly and coming across here. So if we could have a bunch of small 10-acre solar farms throughout Clinton, I think it would be just wonderful. And again, I just want to thank the board for putting the work in and coming up with what I think is a very sensible law. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Calogero, Bull's Head Road. I'm not going to repeat anything that I've already said, and I have to say I want to support Rich in his comments. I think I know what goes into something like this, having worked for a number of years on zoning revision. This is a hard thing to figure out, and it's tedious, and there's lots and lots of factors, and I commend you all for the time and the energy. Also, as Rich pointed out, I'm glad that you made those last changes in terms of the sizes of the parcels and so forth. The only other thing I would add is that since it is a change to a commercial use, that the board help create some kind of meaningful input for a fair assessment on properties that get changed in that way. And I think this may be the wave of the future for larger properties. It's something that might come into play as we consider the event centers as well. If a portion of a property is being used now for commercial uses, if this law passes, there has to be a fair way to break it down, to add to the assessment so that the taxpayer that doesn't have that luxury isn't and doesn't wind up supporting the taxpayers who do have that luxury. If somebody's going to get a check for arbitrarily $3,000 a month for electricity that they produce on a residential piece of property, I'd like to see a mechanism whereby their assessment reflects that, and the town gets some benefit as a result, and that the people in the town who now have something that perhaps they didn't have to live with before have at least no increase, or some sort of benefit. And the other part of Rich's statement, which I would like to glove onto also, is it would also be wonderful if solar energy that's produced locally could help local people instead of going into the grid and getting lost in the general mainstream. Because until that kind of savings is figured out, I don't think the incentive is as great to go solar as it might otherwise be. And I also think that it doesn't reflect the costs to the citizenry in the local communities. So again, thank you all for the hard work.
Thank you. Did you want to comment on solar law?
Rick, could I raise a question about something John said?
Sure.
What about, can this be done, let's say, for example, there was this rezoning thing that you were talking about. Can that be done retroactively or only going forward? In other words, if this law passes and somebody builds a solar farm next week, obviously not going to happen, but it happens. And then 2 years from now, the town board decides to institute the kind of regulation that you're talking about. The person who got the permit last week or next week, could he fall under that as well, or is he exempt from that?
I would like to see,
what the
I would like
legality
to
is.
see if the town was to adopt that type of a statute, I'd like to see that it would include, all solar farms.
Yeah, I think the answer to your question, Elliot, it was something that I emailed a couple of weeks ago in regards to basically there's two ways to do it. One is to basically hurt everybody by saying nobody gets the exemption of solar, or you almost have to write into a permitting process whereby anybody who's going to apply for these solar farms have to, as part of the permitting process, agree to this tax, payback. And in doing so, I think anything that we're going to approve from this point until we approve something like that would be exempt from that. So there would be no back claw of getting them to pay for those taxes.
How about
He
future?
was talking about assessments, though, not
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
necessarily a pilot agreement. He's talking about raising the assessed value of a property because of the solar. And would we be able to do that retroactively? Say, if somebody puts in a solar farm today, 2 years from now, can we raise the assessment?
Right, but what I
because of
sent out in the email was that you either had to do the pilot program, or you had to basically put everybody's solar into the calculation. So there was only two options. One was everybody would be subject to this tax and this improved value, or you had to have a pilot program specifically for those commercial ventures.
Okay.
It's an assessor issue.
Yeah.
You got to talk to the assessor. Albany rules is what guides us.
But I think that the town could craft something to indicate that sort of a
Yeah, I think
way
Wappingers
forward.
did it already, where they did a pilot for their
Well,
commercial farms.
pilot's different. That we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Recognize Judy. Excuse me.
Oh.
Recognize Judy.
Yeah. Oh, Judy, yeah.
Right now, no one's assessments raised because they have solar.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay, you understand that? Only if they apply for the exemption, in which case it's raised, the exemption is raised, or the assessment's raised for whatever the exemption is. So it's always nothing. Got that?
Thank you.
Thank you. How we doing on time?
6:26.
Oh, okay. Got time for a few more comments. Going once. Going twice. Going 50 times. Everybody had a chance on the solar law? Okay.
Thank you.
There being no further comments, I make a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. I make a motion to adjourn the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. This part is done. We will now wait until 6:30, and then we'll start with the regular meeting. There's programs and other handout stuff in the back if you didn't get anything on your way in.
Staple came out of the packet.
What's that?
My staple came out of the packet.